Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Ari, and today we're going to have some more stories about our toxic life. But before we start, it would be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to my channel, like the video, if you enjoy it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now without further ado, let's go. Today's first story. In this story, a devoted husband plans a surprise zoo trip for his wife, only to discover she's been lying about work to see another man. Confronted at the zoo, she admits to cheating. He ends their marriage, leaving her homeless. Despite bitterness, he realizes her suffering is her punishment. He keeps their home and animals, learning that cheating brings only regret and loss. Now let's get into the story. My wife, 42 female, loved animals and worked with them every day at a pet store rescue center. We lived over an hour away from a large zoo. I, 46 male, was surprised we didn't go to the zoo a little more often. We were only there twice, and the last time was years ago. Work kept us busy, so we didn't usually stop to treat ourselves or take any trips out of town. 9 years into our marriage, my wife started spending even less time at home, claiming she was working overtime because her boss was sick. Then there were other random excuses until I just accepted that I could only see her just before bed each night and on the weekends. She always made me feel like everything was great between us and she was happy with our relationship. One day while she was at work, she texted me, "I can't wait to see you." But she quickly corrected it to "Honey, it was weird because she never called me that." Even though it was weird, I didn't quiz her about it. I planned a surprise trip to the zoo and a place called the Garden of Eden. That morning, I woke her up with breakfast in bed and told her to call off because I had a surprise for her. She was actually inconvenienced and said she would get in trouble for calling off. I asked how that was possible if she hadn't taken a day off in years. She was stumped, so she just gave in and said she'd text her boss. She was blindfolded in the car, but only for a few minutes, because she was too anxious to play along. This wasn't going at all how I pictured when she saw the sign for the zoo. She looked like her worst fears were confirmed. I asked her why she looked so upset, so she just changed her expression, trying to seem excited. When she got out of the car, I caught a glimpse of her phone's lock screen, with the preview of her boss's reply to her call-off text. It said, "This is the 5th time this month." My wife had already called off work 5 times this month. I was shocked and confused. There was another text preview, but I couldn't read that one before my wife grabbed her phone. I didn't even know how to bring this up, so we just went along with our zoo visit. As we walked around and watched animals, it seemed like she was looking for something else. I saw her eyes light up. When she finally caught sight of what she was searching for, she did everything she could to steer me in the opposite direction. I was confused and turned around, saying I knew she wanted to pet the giraffes. That's when a young man who worked at the zoo approached us, calling my wife by name. He was confused and looked hurt. He asked her why she was there and why she was with me. Talk about alarming. My heart was instantly racing, and I told him I was her husband. Her face looked like she wanted to cry, but she was too panicked. AP said she was his girlfriend, and they'd been dating for the past 9 months. We both looked at her demanding answers. She just slowly backed up until she started crying and running away. He chased her, but I did not. I was in disbelief. My wife had lied about working to see AP. How many times had they seen each other in the past 9 months? I can only assume it was many, many times. I left the zoo without my wife. When I got home, I threw her stuff out of the house since it wasn't legal for me to lock her out. She returned hours later in an Uber. That must have been an expensive ride. She tried to talk to me, but all I told her repeatedly was to get out. That was all I said to her, hoping to quickly diminish any hope she had that I would forgive her for cheating on me. She cried and wailed, telling me she had nowhere to go and that AP dumped her at the zoo because he didn't know she was married. That's when I said, "You don't deserve to have a man take care of you if all you're going to do is cheat." My wife didn't have anywhere to go after she packed her car with her damp belongings. So she called the boss that just fired her earlier that day and explained everything. He had an apartment for rent above the pet store, but since she'd called off countless times in the past 9 months, he refused to help her out of this. I just snickered to myself, eavesdropping from the window of the house. My wife just drove away and didn't reach out to me again. Even through the divorce, I was kind of bitter that she refused to give me answers or show any more remorse for what she did, but I realized she was definitely struggling and suffering through the consequences of what she'd done. Her refusing to contact me actually worked out better for me, so I wasn't tempted to rekindle our decade-long relationship. I needed to keep myself away so I could heal and accept what happened. I got to keep our home and animals because AP sent me proof of their affair. He was so upset with her for leading him, and while she was married, that he wanted to help me prove what kind of girl she was. Losing the animals was even harder for my wife than losing me or AP. Let this be a lesson to all that cheating never pays off. It only makes you a terrible person that doesn't deserve the things you had with your spouse. Today's second story. In this story, OP met his first wife at a gaming event, and they quickly fell in love, adopting the titles of husband and wife after 8 years together. However, his world shattered when he caught her cheating during her lunch break. Devastated, he left her and moved out. Years later, she reached out seeking reconciliation after her own heartbreak, but he declined, having moved on and found happiness with his lawful wife and her child. Now let's get into the story. Let me tell you about my first wife. We met through mutual friends at work who hosted an Xbox tournament. She just happened to be there, wearing overalls, sitting on a big comfy couch, ready to win. I sat beside her and started learning as much as I could about her without distracting from the game. She was 28 and I was 30. We both worked the same full-time hours in the city, for blocks apart. She was extremely good at video games and charming anyone she spoke to. She was a journalist, without any plans to settle down. Even though she told me this, I still asked her out after the party and she accepted. While we dated and after we moved in with each other, we met up for lunch each day of the work week, occasionally walking the extra half-mile to visit the park. We started calling each other husband and wife, and told our friends and family we were married now. They all freaked out and held the party for us, which used to be one of my favorite memories. Over 8 years, we had a great relationship. I felt like we were meant to be together, and she told me she felt the same. Our life was average and full of work, but she made it bright. We played games, went on trips, ate weird foods, went on city treasure hunts, hosted parties, went to parties, helped out friends, and coped together. Through all the years, we each got promoted twice, but continued working in the same buildings. Besides a handful of times, when one of us was too busy, we continued meeting for lunch every workday. One particular day, she canceled, claiming to be swarmed at work. I still went to the cafe and park to eat lunch. While I was there, eating my tuna sub, I saw my wife. She was walking hand in hand with another man. I nearly choked. I started following them at a distance and watched them take a picture together on his camera. This was before smartphones. He kind of looked like a tourist, which made me ask myself where this guy was from and why he was spending time with my wife on her lunch break. Just before my wife went back inside her work building, they kissed passionately, so I walked up to them and asked what the heck was going on. My loud voice made my wife jump out of her skin and push a pee backward. He stumbled and fell, hurting his left wrist. He cried out furious and confused. He asked me who I was and why she pushed him. I told him this was my wife, and he looked at her stunned and heartbroken. She was just covering her mouth with both hands, probably to stop herself from getting sick. She couldn't believe I found them. I told her I followed her through the park, and I wanted to know why they were kissing or together at all. The only one that knew what was going on was her. She admitted she was chatting with this man on AIM for a long time, after they met in a game chat room while I was sleeping. I was devastated and heartbroken. It felt like I couldn't breathe as all the memories I had with her flashed through my mind. I gave her my heart, and she clearly didn't care. Not enough to keep herself from starting a secret relationship with this man. I knew I had to let her go. I cried and told her I was done. She knew what it meant because of how serious my face and mannerisms were. She started bawling and sat on the sidewalk, begging me to forgive her. Security guards and passers-by stared at the three of us. AP was upset too, complaining that he just drove hours to meet her for the first time, only to find she was lying to him. He held up his wrist, which was swollen, and said he was leaving. He hailed a taxi, and I never saw him again. The hardest thing I ever had to do for myself was leave my wife sitting on the sidewalk, knowing I'd never get to hold her again. For months later, I was fully moved out of the apartment we shared together. I had to have friends of mine help me pack the stuff and get it out of the apartment, otherwise I feared I'd have a mental breakdown and want to stay with her, even though I had no faith or trust in her at all. I just avoided seeing her or forgiving her, because things would never go back to the way they were. We were never lawfully married, so we didn't have to go through a divorce. I got a new apartment pretty easily, and went a long time without hearing anything from my ex. It surprised me how suddenly we stopped talking, but it surprised me even more when she finally called me 4 years later. She was devastated because AP just up and left her. Apparently, he moved into the apartment with her almost immediately after I moved out. Then she caught him cheating on her, and instead of begging for forgiveness, he hightailed it out of there. She wanted me back. We had been together for 8 years before she cheated on me. Before years of separation, after her infidelity helped me to accept the reality of things. Maybe a small part of me still cared about her, but I didn't want her to be my wife again. Besides all that, I was lawfully married by this time, to a woman who has a child, undoubtedly earned my trust and unconditional love, so it felt good to deny her, but wish her well before hanging up. Today's third story. In this story, Sebastian recounts his marriage to Anna, beginning as colleagues before dating. Despite his efforts and affection, Anna cheats on him with his cousin, discovered through her diary. Pretending normalcy, he plans their exposure and divorce. Both his ex-wife and cousin's marriage end. Despite Anna's attempts at reconciliation, Sebastian moves on happily with a new girlfriend, though still nursing heartache. Now let's get into the story. This is Sebastian and my ex-wife, Anna, and I had been married for 2 years before she destroyed what we had. Anna and I were colleagues at one time, but after I got an offer from a more prominent company, I resigned and that was when we began to date. Before that time, Anna and I were not really the colleagues that got along with each other. She was reserved and barely associated with different people, except she was talked to. But despite being introverted, I still had a crazy crush on her. I can only tell her how I felt after I resigned because my former company was against coworkers dating. Luckily, when I told Anna how I felt about her, she admitted that she had the same feelings for me too, and in no time we began to date. I loved Anna's commitment to hard work, her smiles, her energy, and those crystal blue eyes. We got along so well and I enjoyed every moment I spent with her, and when I eventually asked her to marry me, she said yes. For me, money was not an issue because I earned a lot of money from the tech company I worked with, and this also played a significant role in how I care for Anna. On my own, I would drop by clothing stores and buy her clothes, shoes, jewelry, and everything she wanted, whether expensive or not. I also did this because I loved it when my woman looked good and classy. It boosted my ego. I really loved Anna and I wanted her to be happy at all times. But aside from that, when it came to Anna, I didn't mind if she shopped every week or every month because I considered it as investing in her. Even when we were about to buy a house, I allowed her to pick the house she liked despite not liking it that much. Because I believed that if she was happy, then I'd be happy, yet after everything I did for her, she went ahead and cheated on me with my blood. Everything was going fine between Anna and me, but after the incident of a flood that destroyed many houses last year, I was forced to let my cousin and his wife move in with us. They had to begin life from square one because they lost everything they had, and the least I could do was support them. So my cousin and his wife asked if they could move in with us until they got back on their feet, and after I discussed it with Anna, we decided to let them live with us. Anna was thrilled to receive them, and I was glad she would always have company at home, especially when I was not around. Also, the nature of her job allowed her to work from home, and it felt good to know that she would no longer feel lonely while she worked. Little did I know that I allowed my wife to cheat on me with my cousin. The funniest thing was his wife, and I did not notice anything fishy. Whenever we returned from work, they'd act all cool with each other and didn't leave room for suspicion. My cousin, on the other hand, betrayed my trust and repaid me by screwing my wife whenever his wife and I went to work. One weekend, Anna went grocery shopping and asked me to help her fold the clothes in the closet, and that was how I stumbled on her diary tucked under a small pile of unfolded clothes. At first, I didn't want to invade her privacy, but I was curious to know what a 28-year-old woman was writing about, and to my greatest surprise, I found out that my wife and my cousin had been sleeping with each other a month after they moved in with us. I could not believe my eyes, and I was heartbroken to find out she could do that to me after everything I had done for her. A part of me wanted to throw her out, as well as my cousin, but I wanted to hurt her for doing such a thing to me. I didn't even fold the clothes anymore because I didn't want her to find out that I knew. I simply came up with an excuse that I wasn't feeling okay, and she believed me. I continued to pretend everything was fine, but as soon as I got myself together, I contacted a lawyer and he started processing our divorce papers. I also made plans for my cousin because I wanted him to feel my pain. After a couple of weeks, I decided it was time to bust them, so I pretended to leave for work by hiding in the tool shade of our house. When Anna and my cousin thought I left, they came outside, entered the car, and began to kiss before they drove out, and I took pictures of them and sent it to my cousin's wife. I knew she'd come back home in anger, and she did. She initially denied everything until I showed her my pictures that morning. When she realized she could no longer lie, she began to cry and blame my cousin for seducing her, but it was too late. I kicked her and my cousin out of the house, informed her about the divorce papers, and warned her to stay away from me and my house. Some months later, we divorced, and I blocked her on all social media platforms. My cousin's wife divorced him, too, and luckily for them, they didn't have a child yet. Even after the divorce, Anna tried to come to me a few times, but there was nothing I could do at that point. I hated everything about her. She wanted to tell me she was no longer with my cousin, but that was her loss, not mine. Though it's been a while, my heart still aches, and I know it will be all over soon. But I'm way happier now, and my new girlfriend and I are taking things one step at a time.